She walked down the busy city street, her small purse clutched tightly in her hand. The evening was cool, with a soft breeze brushing past her face, carrying the faint smell of street food from nearby stalls. She had been walking for nearly an hour from her part-time job at the cafe, where she had spent the whole afternoon serving drinks and cleaning tables. Her legs ached and her stomach growled, but she kept telling herself that tonight would be different. Tonight she would try something new, something brave. It was her first blind date, and even though she felt nervous, she hoped it would be a chance to escape from the daily struggles she faced. She glanced at her reflection in the shop windows as she passed, smoothing her hair and adjusting her scarf. She had spent hours getting ready with the little time and energy she had left after work. She didn't have fancy clothes, but she had chosen her outfit carefully, hoping it would make her feel confident. Inside her purse there was only $5. Just $5 to cover the entire evening. Her heart sank every time she thought about it, but she told herself she could make it work. She could manage a simple meal, and maybe she could charm her date enough to keep the conversation flowing. It wasn't about the money, she reminded herself. It was about the experience. As she approached the restaurant, she noticed the warm glow of the lights spilling onto the sidewalk. The smell of freshly cooked food made her mouth water, and for a brief moment she imagined what it would feel like to order something more than the cheapest item on the menu. She shook the thought away. That was a luxury she couldn't afford. Tonight she would focus on enjoying the company, on trying not to let her lack of money define the evening. Inside, the restaurant was cozy and softly lit. Small tables were arranged with careful attention, each adorned with a single candle flickering gently. The hum of conversation filled the room, mingling with the clinking of cutlery and the occasional laughter from a nearby table. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for a familiar face, a hint of her date's presence. He arrived a few minutes later, a young man who looked friendly but slightly awkward. He smiled nervously, holding out his hand for a brief handshake. She returned the smile, hoping it masked the anxiety she felt. They sat down, ordering water and the least expensive meal on the menu. She couldn't help but feel a pang of embarrassment, wishing she had more to spend. But her date didn't seem to notice or care. He chatted politely, asking about her day and her work. She answered cautiously, trying to keep the conversation light and engaging. As they talked, her attention wandered to a nearby table. There sat a man in a tailored suit, his hair slightly messy from a long day, sitting with a young boy who appeared to be around 6 years old. The boy was coloring in a small notepad, occasionally looking up at his father with questions and laughter. The man's eyes were kind, focused, and patient. He was speaking softly, gesturing with his hands as he explained something to his son. There was something genuine in the way he interacted with the child, a sense of care and warmth that immediately caught her attention. She tried to return her focus to her date, but the contrast between her current situation and the lives of the man and his son at the next table made her heart ache. She felt small, insignificant, trapped in a world where money and opportunities always seemed just out of reach. She whispered quietly to herself, almost without realizing it, "If only life were a little easier." Her words were soft, but enough to carry to the nearby table. The man glanced over briefly, his eyes meeting hers for a moment. He gave a small, understanding smile before returning to his conversation with his son. The gesture was simple, yet it made her feel noticed, as if someone truly saw her struggles without judgment. She quickly looked away, embarrassed by the unintentional attention. Her date continued talking, but she felt a mix of curiosity and awe for the man at the next table. There was something about him, something in the calm way he carried himself, that made her wonder about the stories he carried, the life he led. She sipped her water nervously, trying to steady her racing heart. The conversation with her date felt stilted, and she struggled to keep the mood light. Every time her eyes wandered to the man and his son, she felt a mixture of admiration and longing. She couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to live a life where kindness and stability were constants, where someone could smile at her without expecting anything in return. The man's presence was quietly comforting, even from a distance. As the meal progressed, she found herself laughing more at her date's awkward jokes, trying to push away the feelings of inadequacy that bubbled inside her. She reminded herself that she was here for the experience, for the chance to meet someone new, and not to measure her worth by the amount of money she had in her pocket. She took a deep breath, focusing on the present moment, and tried to engage genuinely in the conversation. Meanwhile, the man at the next table continued to observe discreetly. He noticed the young woman's nervous gestures, the way she tried to keep her composure despite the obvious worry about money. There was a quiet strength about her, a resilience that spoke volumes even in her brief interactions with her date. He felt a sense of respect and curiosity, wondering about the life of someone so young yet carrying such burdens. The boy at his side, oblivious to the adult concerns, laughed as his father made a funny face. The man smiled, ruffling his hair affectionately, and glanced back at the young woman briefly, acknowledging her presence without intruding. There was a subtle connection forming, a recognition of humanity and struggle that transcended words. The young woman finished her simple meal, her stomach full enough but her heart still heavy with thoughts of the man and his child. She felt a strange mix of hope and anxiety, unsure of what the evening would bring but quietly grateful for the unspoken kindness that had reached her from the next table. Her date tried to continue the conversation, but she found herself distracted, her mind wandering to the possibility of meeting someone who could understand her without needing explanations or pretenses. As the check arrived, panic crept in again. She counted her $5 carefully, realizing it might barely cover her portion. Her date fumbled with his own wallet, looking slightly embarrassed, and she felt the familiar sting of shame at not being able to contribute more. She glanced toward the man at the next table once more, who noticed her counting and gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, before returning his attention to his son. The gesture was small, but it gave her a flicker of reassurance. She smiled weakly, trying to mask her anxiety, and told herself that no matter what happened next, she had survived the first part of the evening. She had stepped into the unknown, faced her fears, and for a brief moment felt noticed by someone who seemed to understand the weight she carried. The night was far from over, and she couldn't know what surprises might come, but the simple acts of observation and kindness from the man at the next table had already left a mark on her heart. As they prepared to leave, she felt a mixture of relief and lingering curiosity. She had survived the initial nerves, and though the evening had been challenging, it had also been illuminating. The glimpse of genuine care and humanity she had witnessed offered a quiet hope that life might hold unexpected moments of kindness, moments that could change everything. She left the restaurant with a small sense of anticipation, unaware that the night had only just begun, and that the man and his son at the next table would play a pivotal role in a story she could never have imagined. She walked out of the restaurant, the cool night air brushing against her face. Her heart was still pounding from the nerves and the small, quiet moments that had made the evening feel larger than it really was. She could not stop thinking about the man and his son at the next table, how they had seemed so genuine and calm amidst the soft hum of conversation in the restaurant. Even from across the room, his presence had been grounding, a reminder that kindness existed even when life felt unfair. Her date had tried to make small talk on the way out, but she found herself half listening, distracted by the memory of the gentle smiles, the careful attention he had shown to his son, and the way he had quietly acknowledged her. She felt a strange mix of emotions, curiosity, admiration, and a twinge of embarrassment for feeling so affected by someone she had only seen briefly. They walked toward the exit, and the young woman noticed how polite her date was, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was a barrier between them. He was courteous, but he seemed unsure how to reach her, how to cross the invisible wall she had built around herself. She had grown used to carrying her own burdens, keeping her life simple and maintaining a careful balance just to survive. The thought of opening up to someone else was both frightening and exciting. Outside, the street was alive with the sounds of the city. Cars honked in the distance, the chatter of passers-by filled the air, and neon signs cast soft glows on the wet pavement. The young woman felt a mix of relief and tension, glad to be outside the restaurant but still carrying the weight of her thoughts. She glanced at her date, who was smiling nervously, clearly hoping for a good impression. She forced a small smile in return, trying to maintain a polite distance. As they walked a few steps, she heard a familiar voice calling her name softly. She turned, startled, and saw the man from the next table approaching, holding his son's hand. He looked calm, with an approachable warmth that immediately eased some of her tension. His son trailed slightly behind, glancing up at her with curiosity and innocence. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said gently, his voice calm and kind. "I couldn't help but notice you earlier. Are you okay?" She blinked, unsure of what to say. She wasn't expecting anyone to follow up, and certainly not him. There was a moment of silence, filled with the sounds of the city around them, and then she found herself smiling nervously. I'm fine. Thank you. That's very kind of you." He nodded, understanding without judgment. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right. It's not always easy to enjoy a meal when life feels heavy." The young woman's chest tightened. It was true, and yet hearing someone voice it without criticism or pity felt comforting. She found herself opening up in small, cautious ways, telling him about her 2 part-time jobs, the struggles of paying rent and the constant worry about money. She explained how tonight was a blind date, and how she had only $5 to spend. Her voice trembled slightly, but there was no judgment in his eyes, only genuine interest and understanding. He listened intently, nodding occasionally, asking thoughtful questions without ever sounding intrusive. He spoke of his own life as a single parent, juggling work and caring for his young son. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but also a sense of fulfillment that came from responsibility and love. There was no pretense, no display of wealth or status, only the quiet reality of a man trying to do his best. Meanwhile, his son played nearby, drawing shapes in the dirt with a small stick, laughing when his father made funny faces. The young woman found herself smiling despite her nerves, captivated by the natural joy and connection between the father and child. It was a stark contrast to the awkward tension she had felt with her date, and it made her realize that genuine connection did not rely on appearances or money. They stood there for a while, talking quietly, the city's noises fading into the background. She felt a strange sense of relief, as if a weight she had been carrying for years had lifted slightly. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel judged or pitied. She felt seen and heard, acknowledged for the person she was, rather than the financial struggles she faced. Her date, standing a few feet away, seemed unsure how to react. There was no jealousy, only awkwardness as he realized the young woman's attention had shifted. She noticed this, and gently reassured him that it wasn't about him, but about a moment of unexpected understanding and kindness she had never anticipated. She felt grateful for her date's politeness, but her heart was already leaning toward a new connection, one that felt sincere and unforced. As the conversation continued, the man shared small stories about parenting, work challenges, and the simple joys of everyday life. She listened intently, feeling inspired by his ability to balance responsibilities and maintain a sense of humanity. There was no arrogance, no boastfulness, only a quiet strength that resonated deeply with her own struggles. Time seemed to pass differently in their conversation. Minutes felt like hours, and the young woman realized she was laughing, sharing small anecdotes from her life and feeling a sense of ease she hadn't felt in years. She felt the tension of survival soften, replaced by a sense of possibility. She could imagine a future where people were kind and understanding, where moments of compassion could change the course of a day, or even a life. Eventually, the father glanced at his watch, realizing it was getting late. He offered her a warm smile, saying, "It was nice meeting you. I hope the rest of your evening goes well." She smiled back, feeling a bittersweet mix of gratitude and disappointment that the encounter was ending. "Thank you. You've been very kind. I won't forget this." He nodded, and with a gentle wave, he and his son began to walk away. She watched them go, feeling a lingering sense of hope and warmth. She turned to her date, who had remained patient and polite, and realized that while the blind date had been intended as a social exercise, it had also led her to a life-changing moment of human connection. As she walked home later that night, the city lights shimmering on the wet streets, she reflected on the evening. The kindness of a stranger had reminded her that the world wasn't entirely cold or indifferent. Even in the hardest moments, there were glimpses of humanity that could inspire courage and hope. She smiled softly to herself, clutching her small purse with its $5 inside, realizing that sometimes the greatest wealth wasn't money at all, but the moments of understanding and empathy that could touch a heart and change a life forever. The next morning she woke up with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Her mind kept replaying the events of the previous night. The brief conversation with the single dad and his son, the way he had listened without judgment, and the quiet kindness that had made her feel seen. She had expected a normal, uneventful blind date, but instead something unexpected had happened, something that left her feeling both hopeful and confused. She went about her morning routine, washing her face and making a small breakfast with the ingredients she could afford. The city outside was starting to wake up, people rushing to work, shops opening their doors, and the hum of daily life creating a rhythm that felt both comforting and exhausting. She thought about how different her life was compared to the man she had met. She had barely enough to get by, juggling jobs and responsibilities, while he seemed to carry a life of stability and care, at least for his son. Despite the differences, she couldn't shake the memory of the simple interaction they had shared. His attention had been genuine, his warmth had been real, and she realized that in a world full of pretense and appearances, moments like that were rare and precious. She found herself wondering if she would ever see him again, if fate might allow their paths to cross once more. She left her apartment and walked to her first job, a small cafe where she spent her mornings serving coffee and pastries. The routine was familiar, almost comforting, but her mind kept wandering. She found herself replaying little details, how he had smiled at her, how he had acknowledged her quietly, the way his son had laughed and made the moment feel lighter. She had never felt so understood by a stranger, and it left her longing for more than fleeting moments of kindness. During her break, she sat outside the cafe, watching people pass by. She thought about the power of simple gestures, how a small act of understanding could shift the course of someone's day or even their perspective on life. She remembered her own struggles, the exhaustion of working multiple jobs and the constant worry about money. Yet, for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope that perhaps life could hold moments of unexpected generosity, moments that could change everything. Later that afternoon, she received a text message that made her heart skip a beat. It was from the man she had met at the restaurant. He had taken the time to send a message, thanking her for the brief conversation and expressing a desire to meet again. She stared at the screen, unsure if she should respond. Part of her was hesitant, wary of opening herself to someone she barely knew. Another part of her felt a rush of excitement, a sense of possibility that she hadn't experienced in a long time. After a few moments of contemplation, she typed a simple reply, expressing her gratitude and willingness to meet again. Her fingers trembled slightly as she hit send, and she felt a mix of relief and anticipation. The rest of the day passed in a blur as she went about her work, her mind constantly drifting to the upcoming meeting. She imagined what it would be like to spend more time with someone who seemed to understand the weight of life, without expecting anything in return. That evening, they agreed to meet at a small park near the city center. She arrived first, finding a bench under a large tree where the light from nearby street lamps created a soft, warm glow. The park was quiet, the sounds of the city muted by the distance and the trees surrounding the area. She felt a sense of calm as she waited, her heart pounding with both excitement and nervousness. When he arrived, his son holding his hand, she felt a wave of warmth wash over her. He greeted her with a gentle smile, and his son waved shyly, hiding slightly behind his father. The young woman smiled back, feeling an immediate sense of comfort. The air between them was easy, filled with a quiet understanding that did not require words to explain. They walked slowly through the park, talking about everyday things, the beauty of the changing seasons, the simple joys of childhood, and the little moments that made life worth living. She shared stories of her part-time jobs, her struggles, and her small victories. He listened attentively, never interrupting, never judging, simply offering his presence and his understanding. His son ran ahead briefly, chasing after a stray leaf that had fallen from the tree, and the father's eyes followed him with a mix of affection and attentiveness. She watched them, feeling a sense of awe at the bond between parent and child. It was a reminder of the kind of love and care that could exist in the world, a love that was steady, patient, and unconditional. As they continued walking, She realized that she was laughing more freely than she had in years. The conversation flowed naturally, filled with small jokes, shared observations, and genuine curiosity about each other's lives. She felt a sense of ease, a rare feeling that allowed her to relax and simply be herself. It was a stark contrast to the tension she had felt during the blind date, where every word had been measured and cautious. They found a quiet spot near a small pond, the water reflecting the soft glow of the street lamps and the twinkling city lights in the distance. He sat down on a bench, his son leaning against him with a small sigh of contentment. She joined them, feeling a sense of connection that transcended words. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, heard, and understood. They talked about dreams and aspirations, the small hopes that kept them going despite the challenges they faced. She shared her desire to pursue education and improve her situation, while he spoke about the goals he had for his son and the balance he tried to maintain between work and family. Their conversation was honest and heartfelt, filled with empathy and respect. Time seemed to pass unnoticed as they sat there, the world around them fading into the background. The young woman realized that this moment, simple and unassuming, was significant. It was a turning point, a reminder that kindness and genuine connection could exist even in the most unexpected circumstances. She felt a sense of gratitude for the chance encounter that had brought them together, and a quiet hope that it was only the beginning. As the evening grew darker, they decided to walk back toward the city streets, their conversation continuing in the easy, natural rhythm they had found. She felt a sense of warmth in her chest, a feeling that she hadn't experienced in years, a combination of comfort, trust, and anticipation for what might come next. Before they parted ways, he turned to her with a gentle smile. "It's been really nice spending time with you. I hope we can do this again." She nodded, her heart full. "I'd like that," she said softly. There was no hesitation, no doubt, only a quiet affirmation of the connection they had begun to build. They exchanged a few more words, and then he and his son walked away, leaving her with a sense of hope and excitement. She watched them go, feeling a renewed belief in the power of kindness and the potential for new beginnings. The evening had been simple yet profound, and she knew that it would stay with her for a long time. As she walked home, the city lights reflected on the wet pavement, creating a sense of magic in the ordinary world. She felt a sense of gratitude for the small, unexpected moments that could change the course of life, and a quiet determination to hold on to the hope and warmth that the encounter had given her. She knew that her life was still full of challenges, but she also knew that moments of genuine connection could make even the hardest days feel lighter, and perhaps even transform the path ahead in ways she could not yet imagine. The next few days were filled with a strange, quiet anticipation for the young woman. She went about her routines, working her shifts at the cafe and the small retail store she helped at on weekends, but her mind kept wandering back to the encounter in the park. She replayed each moment, the laughter, the small stories shared, the gentle presence of the man and his son. It was as though a door had opened, showing her a world where kindness and understanding were not rare but possible. She felt a growing desire to see him again, not out of need but out of genuine curiosity and connection. One afternoon, while stocking shelves at the store, she received a message from him. Simple yet heartfelt, an invitation to meet for coffee the next morning at a small, quiet cafe near the city library. Her heart leapt at the idea, and after a moment's hesitation, she agreed. She wasn't used to such gestures. People rarely reached out with genuine intent, and the thought that someone had thought of her filled her with a strange warmth. The next morning, she arrived early, nervous and slightly jittery. She found a small corner table by the window, where sunlight filtered softly through the glass, casting warm patterns across the table. She watched as people passed outside, but her focus remained inward, thinking about how her life had been so constrained by worry and limitations, yet how a single encounter could feel so freeing. He arrived with his son shortly after, greeting her with a smile that felt like reassurance. The boy waved shyly, holding onto his father's hand as they walked toward her. She stood to greet them, and the father offered a warm, gentle handshake, his eyes showing a quiet kindness that immediately eased her tension. They settled into the small cafe, ordering simple drinks and pastries. The conversation started cautiously, as it often did when meeting someone new, but it quickly found its rhythm. He asked about her work, her life, and her dreams. She shared details about her struggles, the multiple jobs she worked, and the constant balancing act of living with little money. There was no pity in his responses, only attentive listening and occasional questions that showed genuine interest. He spoke about his life as a single parent, the joys and challenges of raising a child, and the effort it took to maintain balance between work and family. His son, fascinated by a small drawing book, sat quietly coloring but occasionally looked up to join the conversation. The young woman found herself smiling at the child's innocence and curiosity, realizing that such small, ordinary moments could hold a deep sense of joy and connection. The father watched his son with gentle care, offering guidance without pressure, creating an atmosphere of security and warmth. As the conversation flowed, she began to notice details she hadn't before. The way he listened intently, leaning slightly forward, nodding at appropriate moments, and offering words of encouragement. He was humble yet confident, someone who carried responsibility without arrogance. She admired his ability to balance life and work, to nurture his son, and still maintain a sense of gentleness and understanding. She shared small anecdotes from her life, funny stories from work, her attempts to save money, and the tiny victories that made her feel proud despite her hardships. He laughed at appropriate moments, sometimes sharing similar experiences from his own life, creating a sense of equality and understanding. The conversation never felt forced. It flowed naturally, a dance of shared experiences, curiosity, and empathy. Time passed unnoticed. Hours slipped by as they talked and laughed quietly in their corner of the cafe. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythm, people rushing to appointments, cars honking, and the world continuing as usual. Inside, there was a sense of stillness, a pocket of warmth and understanding that seemed to exist only for them. The young woman realized she had not felt this comfortable with anyone in years. There was no pretense, no judgment, just two people sharing their lives honestly. The boy grew restless after a while, fidgeting with his drawing supplies. His father stood, offering to take him for a short walk to stretch his legs, and the young woman watched them go with a quiet sense of admiration. She realized that in his life, there were responsibilities and commitments that always came first, yet he still made room for connection and kindness. It made her reflect on her own life and the moments she had overlooked in her rush to survive. After a few minutes, they returned to the table, the child slightly tired but happy. The young woman felt a warm sense of inclusion, as though she were part of something gentle and meaningful, even if temporarily. She realized that life didn't always have to be a struggle. Moments of genuine human connection could bring light to the darkest days. As the morning faded into afternoon, they decided to leave the cafe and walk through a nearby park. The sun shone brightly, casting soft light on the paths, and the air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers. The father held his son's hand and she walked alongside them, talking about hopes, fears, and small dreams. She felt safe and valued in a way she had not experienced before. It was a feeling she wanted to hold on to, a rare sense of belonging and recognition. They came across a small pond, ducks gliding across the water's surface, and sat on a nearby bench. The young woman shared her aspirations to pursue education and create a better life, while he spoke about his hopes for his son and the balance he tried to maintain in a demanding career. The conversation was honest and heartfelt, filled with a sense of shared humanity. She realized that despite the differences in their lives, there was common ground, a desire for understanding, compassion, and growth. Her heart felt lighter than it had in years. She laughed freely, shared stories without fear of judgment, and listened with genuine interest to his experiences. It was a rare and precious moment, one that reminded her that life could be meaningful even amidst challenges. The presence of someone who understood her without expectation or pretense was liberating. As they walked back toward the city streets, the young woman reflected on the depth of the connection they had begun to form. She felt a sense of gratitude for the chance encounter that had brought them together, and a quiet hope that it could lead to something lasting. She realized that kindness, understanding, and genuine attention could create bonds stronger than wealth, status, or appearances. Before parting ways, the father turned to her with a gentle smile. "It's been really nice spending time with you today. I hope we can do this again soon." She smiled back, her heart full of warmth. "I'd like that," she said softly. There was no hesitation, only a quiet affirmation of the connection they had begun to build. They exchanged a few more words, and then he and his son walked away, leaving her with a renewed sense of hope and possibility. She watched them go, feeling the weight of her daily struggles lighten just a little, reminded that life could hold moments of unexpected kindness and genuine connection. The world felt larger, more open, and filled with potential. Walking home, she thought about how simple gestures, a smile, a moment of attention, a kind word, could create ripples of change in someone's life. She realized that even though her life was still full of challenges, she had discovered a sense of possibility, a reminder that human connection could bring warmth, understanding, and hope even in the midst of struggle. She felt ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that the smallest acts of kindness could sometimes be the most powerful forces in life. Days passed, and the young woman found herself thinking constantly about the man and his son. Every free moment she had, she replayed their conversations in her mind, the laughter, the thoughtful words, and the quiet understanding that had made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. It was as if a door had opened, revealing a world where kindness and connection were possible despite the challenges life threw at her. Her days continued to be busy with work, but now they carried a new sense of anticipation. She woke up each morning with a flicker of hope, wondering when she might see him again, when another moment of genuine connection might arrive. Even the simplest things, like walking to the cafe or making her way home after a long shift, were touched by the memory of their time together. She felt lighter, as though the small interactions had begun to heal some of the weariness life had left on her spirit. One evening, she received a message from him, inviting her to a small neighborhood event with his son. It was informal, a chance to enjoy some music, food, and conversation in the company of others, but she felt a wave of excitement. This was another opportunity to connect, to share moments that weren't constrained by worry or money. She accepted, eager to see them again and experience the warmth of their company. On the day of the event, she arrived early, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. The venue was lively, filled with people enjoying themselves, but she focused her attention on finding him and his son. When she spotted them, he waved gently, and his son ran ahead with a gleeful shout, leaving them both smiling. She made her way toward them, feeling her heart lift with every step. They greeted her warmly, and she immediately felt at ease. The boy tugged gently at his father's hand, as if inviting her into their small circle, and she accepted the invitation with a quiet happiness. They walked together, enjoying the sights and sounds of the event. The man was attentive, ensuring she felt included, asking her opinions and thoughts and listening with genuine interest. She noticed once again the balance he maintained. His son's needs came first, yet he made sure she felt valued and respected. It was a delicate harmony, one she had rarely encountered in her life. They shared small snacks, laughed at the little jokes his son made, and wandered from one activity to another. The young woman found herself opening up more, sharing her thoughts, dreams, and even her fears. She talked about the pressures of her jobs, the constant worry about money, and her desire to improve her life through education. He listened, never judging, always responding with empathy and understanding. It was a rare feeling, being heard so completely, without the need to defend herself or explain away her struggles. As the evening progressed, the man began to share more about his own life, the challenges of being a single parent, the sacrifices he made to provide stability for his son, and the dreams he held for both of them. She admired his honesty and humility. There was no need to impress anyone, no need for pretension. He simply shared the truth of his life. The young woman felt a deep respect growing within her, not just for him, but for the life he had built with such care and integrity. They found a quiet corner to sit, and the boy played nearby, content in the safety of his father's attention. She realized how much this moment mirrored her own desires, a sense of security, a feeling of being valued, and a place where she could be herself without worry. She laughed freely, sharing small stories from her past, and he responded with warmth and interest. The conversation flowed naturally, with moments of silence that were comfortable rather than awkward. She realized that she was forming a connection that went beyond surface-level attraction. It was rooted in understanding, kindness, and mutual respect. As the night grew late, the event began to wind down. The boy, tired but happy, leaned against his father, and they prepared to leave. The young woman felt a pang of sadness that the evening was ending, but it was accompanied by a sense of fulfillment. She had experienced something rare and meaningful, a connection that was both gentle and profound. Before parting ways, he turned to her with a soft, reassuring smile. "It's been wonderful spending time with you. I hope we can do this again soon." She nodded, feeling her heart full. "I'd really like that," she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swelling inside her. There was no hesitation, only a sincere acknowledgement of the bond they were forming. They exchanged a few final words, and then he and his son walked away, leaving her with a sense of warmth and hope that lingered long after they were gone. She watched them leave, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected encounters that had brought them together. Life was still challenging, still full of obstacles, but she now carried with her a sense of possibility, a reminder that genuine connection could provide strength and comfort even in difficult times. Over the following weeks, their meetings became more frequent. They went for walks, shared meals at small cafes, and spent time in the park, always with his son present. Each encounter strengthened the bond, built on honesty, respect, and shared moments of joy. She found herself looking forward to their time together, feeling a growing sense of security and trust. One day, as they walked through the park, the young woman realized that her life had begun to change in subtle but significant ways. She approached her work with renewed energy, finding small successes that had previously gone unnoticed. She smiled more often, laughed more freely, and carried a sense of hope that had been absent for years. The connection with him and his son had shown her that life could hold unexpected kindness and warmth, even when circumstances were difficult. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the city, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from a simple blind date to a chance encounter with a man who had seen her struggles without judgment, to a growing bond filled with laughter, understanding, and care. She realized that life could be richer than she had ever imagined. The warmth, compassion, and genuine connection she had experienced were priceless, far beyond the limits of money or status. She understood now that moments of true kindness could transform a life, providing not just comfort, but inspiration to strive for something better. She felt a deep gratitude for the man and his son, whose presence had illuminated a path forward filled with hope and possibility. Her heart was lighter, her spirit stronger, and her life richer, not because of wealth, but because of connection, empathy, and the simple power of being seen. Walking home that evening, she knew that challenges would continue, that her journey was far from over, but she carried with her the understanding that the world could still hold moments of unexpected joy. She smiled softly to herself, knowing that sometimes a simple act of kindness, a moment of genuine understanding, or a shared laugh could change everything. And in that quiet, beautiful realization, she found hope, strength, and the promise of a brighter future ahead. Months passed, and the young woman found herself reflecting on how much had changed since that first blind date. The initial encounter, which had seemed like a small and perhaps inconsequential event, had grown into something meaningful and transformative. The connection she had formed with the single dad and his son had deepened, becoming a source of strength and hope that shaped her days and guided her choices. She continued to work her jobs, facing the daily challenges of life with renewed energy. The long hours at the cafe and the retail store no longer felt like a burden in the same way. She approached her responsibilities with a newfound sense of purpose, driven by the hope that her efforts could lead to a better life. Each shift became an opportunity to learn, grow, and save, and she noticed small victories along the way. Extra tips, kind words from regular customers, and the satisfaction of completing her tasks efficiently. Her time with the man and his son had become a cornerstone of her life. They met frequently, sometimes for simple walks in the park, other times at local cafes or community events. Each meeting was filled with laughter, conversation, and shared experiences that were becoming the foundation of a deep and lasting bond. She found herself opening up more than she had with anyone else, discussing her hopes, fears, and dreams without hesitation. In turn, he shared his own experiences, the challenges of being a single parent and the joys that his son brought into his life. The young woman learned to appreciate the depth of character that came from facing responsibilities with integrity and love. One afternoon, they decided to visit a small art fair in the city. The young woman had never attended anything like it before, and the colors, sounds, and smells of the fair excited her in a way that was both overwhelming and exhilarating. She wandered through the booths with him and his son, admiring the handmade crafts, paintings, and sculptures. They stopped at a stall selling small hand-carved figurines, and she smiled as his son picked up a tiny wooden bird and showed it to her proudly. They spent the afternoon exploring together, sharing snacks and laughing at the boy's endless curiosity. The young woman realized that these moments were teaching her something profound. Life's richness was not measured by money or status, but by the experiences, relationships, and genuine connections that one cultivated. She felt gratitude for the chance encounter that had led to this new chapter in her life. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the city, they found a quiet spot on a bench overlooking a small fountain. The boy played nearby, making small splashes in the water, while they sat together talking quietly. The young woman reflected on how far she had come since the first evening she had nervously walked into that restaurant, with only $5 in her pocket. She had learned that vulnerability could be met with kindness, and that opening herself to others could create bonds that were both strong and supportive. The man shared a story about his own childhood, the lessons he had learned about perseverance, responsibility, and compassion. She listened intently, realizing how much wisdom could come from experience, especially when it was paired with humility and care. She found herself nodding, offering her thoughts and even sharing her own small insights about life's challenges. They spoke about the importance of teaching his son values like empathy, honesty, and resilience, and she felt inspired by his dedication and love. As the evening grew darker, they walked back toward the main streets, the boy holding his father's hand and occasionally reaching out to hers. The young woman felt a profound sense of belonging, as if she had found a small family unit that welcomed her without question. It was a rare and beautiful feeling, one that gave her strength and courage in a world that had often felt harsh and unforgiving. In the following weeks, their connection continued to grow. They celebrated small milestones together, like the boy's achievements at school or her success in saving enough money for a small personal goal. They attended community events, shared quiet meals, and spent time in the park, each experience building trust and understanding. She began to notice changes within herself. Her confidence was increasing, her outlook on life more hopeful, and her ability to handle challenges more resilient. One day, as they were walking through a local market, the young woman realized how deeply she had come to care for them. The boy ran ahead to explore a small toy stall, and she smiled as she watched him. She glanced at the man who was watching his son with a mixture of affection and attentiveness, and felt a wave of gratitude for his presence in her life. She understood that their bond was more than friendship. It was a shared experience of growth, trust, and mutual respect. She began to imagine a future where they continued to be part of each other's lives, supporting, encouraging, and celebrating one another. The thought of being a positive influence in their lives filled her with purpose and hope. She realized that while life's challenges would never completely disappear, the support, understanding, and love they shared could make even the hardest days manageable. As autumn approached, the three of them spent a quiet evening in a small cafe, the warmth of the space a comforting contrast to the cool air outside. They talked about dreams, ambitions, and the small joys that made life meaningful. The young woman shared her plans to pursue further education, and he encouraged her, offering practical advice and reassurance. The boy listened with fascination, occasionally interjecting with his own questions and observations, making them all laugh. By the time they left the cafe, the city lights shimmered on the wet streets, creating a sense of magic and possibility. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them together. The chance blind date, the unexpected kindness, and the deepening connections that had transformed her life. She understood that true wealth was not measured in dollars but in love, understanding, and shared experiences. Walking home, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. Vulnerability could lead to meaningful connections. Kindness could transform lives, and genuine human bonds were among the most precious things one could have. She felt hopeful for the future, knowing that while challenges would continue, she now had a support system and relationships that provided strength, comfort, and joy. The young woman realized that the path ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer faced it with fear or doubt. She had learned that life's most valuable moments were often unplanned, arising from simple acts of empathy, patience, and care. Her heart was full of hope, her spirit strengthened, and her life richer than it had ever been, all because of the chance encounter that had started with a simple blind date and a stranger's quiet act of kindness.